Welcome back to stage 5 of this demo lesson. By the end of stage 4, this is the infrastructure that you've configured. We've got the on-premises directory on the right, the AWS directory on the left, and a two-way forest trust configured and verified between these two isolated active directories. In stage 5 of this demo lesson, you're going to implement the FSx managed file server product within AWS, which creates a highly available managed file share. And then once FSx has been implemented, you're going to configure the distributed file system between the file server on-premises and the implementation of FSx. And this is a fairly common architecture that you might find in the real world if you're intending to migrate files from on-premises to AWS, or if you're wanting to configure rich coexistence. Now this is what you're going to implement, so let's move over to the console and get started. Now FSx is a managed file storage product. Specifically, it allows you to create file shares that can be used in Windows networks. So step 1 is to create an implementation of FSx. We need to create an Animals for Life file share that can be used either to integrate with the on-premises environment or to migrate to from the on-premises environment. So click on Services. Into the search box, type FSx and then open that in a new tab. Then click on Create File System. FSx supports a number of different types of file systems. We're going to create Amazon FSx for Windows File Server, so select that option. You can read about the product, including its features and some key points that you need to be aware of. Once you've done that, click on Next. I want you to call the file system name A4L Files. So this is the name that the file system will have. We want it to be resilient, so select Multi-AZ, and we want it to be performant, so select SSD. Now we're going to use the minimum possible capacity to keep this demo as cheap as possible, so type 32 under storage capacity. Scroll down. Under Networking and Security, we need to select the VPC that this product is provisioned into. So this is a VPC-based product. So under Virtual Private Cloud, click on the drop-down and make sure you select AWS-VPC. For VPC security groups, click on the drop-down and select the one that has Instance SG in the name. So this was automatically created by CloudFormation. Then under Preferred Subnet, in the top box, select AWS-Private-A. Under Standby Subnet, click on the drop-down and select AWS-Private-B. This ensures that the file system provision is highly available. Under Windows Authentication, you can choose which Active Directory installation will be used to support logins and access for this file share. Now you can select self-managed Active Directories, or you can select AWS-managed Microsoft Active Directories. Now this is one of very few products that supports connecting to a self-managed Active Directory. Most AWS products which support Active Directory need you to connect either to the managed Microsoft Active Directory or AD Connector. This is one of very few products that you can select self-managed Microsoft Active Directory and manually configure the integration with an existing on-premises directory system. But for this demonstration, we're going to pick AWS Managed Microsoft Active Directory, click on the drop-down and select the aws.animalsforlife.org directory. Once you've selected that, scroll all the way down to the bottom, click on Next. Everything else looks good, so go ahead and click on Create File System. Now, as with other steps in this demo lesson, this can take some time to create, and we will need it to finish creating before we can continue. So go ahead, pause the video, wait for the status to change to available, and then we're good to continue. Okay, so that file system is now in an available state, and that can take anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. It's another AWS product, much like RDS and Directory Service, that does have a fairly lengthy provisioning time. Now, because we've configured the two-way forest trust between our AWS Active Directory and on-premises Active Directory, and we've added the on-premises admin user to the delegated admin groups within the AWS directory, it means in theory that both the AWS side and on-premise side will have access to this file share. So let's test that out. If we click on the A4L files to open up the details and then scroll down, and then just copy the DNS name into your clipboard. Then we need to move across to the on-premises environment. So you should still have a remote desktop session open through the on-premises Jumpbox onto the client machine. And you'll be able to tell that by the text at the top right. Now you've still got the Windows Explorer open to the on-premises file server and then the file share called A4L files, which is on that file server. Now if you open a new Explorer window and then into the box type // and then paste in the DNS name for the FSx implementation that you just copied into your clipboard. So paste that in and press enter. And then you can see a file share called share that's actually running on the FSx product. So this is a managed file share product. It's running inside AWS and it's natively compatible with all of the Windows file sharing features. So now we have two file shares for the organization, one that's running on premises, so that's the original one that's running on the file server, and one that's running within AWS. And with no further configuration, we can access both of those, and we could perform a manual migration. So we could copy all of the data that's on the on-premises file share over to the new FSx-based file share. But because it's Windows compatible, we can go one step further. We can actually configure DFS, or the distributed file system. So let's have a look at how we can do that. So click on the Start button and type DFS and open up the DFS management application. So DFS is a really useful feature available as part of Windows, and it provides two main functions. The first function is namespaces. Now namespaces allows you to create a hierarchy within DFS that you can use for accessing your files. So rather than accessing a file server by name and then a share on that file server, you can create a namespace which maps to that file server. And the benefit is that you're abstracted away from the physical file server. If you ever need to do a migration, you can copy the data across to a new server, change where this namespace points at, and you don't have to perform any reconfiguration for your user base. So let's go ahead and create a namespace. So click on New Namespace, and then click on Browse, and you'll need to provide the name of a server to host this namespace. So we're going to use one of the domain controllers, so DC1. So type that in and click on Check Names, click OK, click on Next. For the name, type private, click on Next. It's going to be a domain-based namespace, so make sure that that box is checked. And you'll see a preview of the domain-based namespace name. So it's // the name of the domain and then the name of the namespace. So in this case, private. So let's click on Next and then click on Create. And that will create the namespace. And then inside the namespace, so select it, right-click, New Folder, and let's call this A4L Files. Now, to a folder, we need to add folder targets, which are the actual shares on file servers. So let's do that. So click on Add, and first we want to add the on-premises file server. So // file server // and then A4L files, and then click on OK. And next, we want to add the FSx-based file share. So click on Add, // and then paste in the DNS name of the FSx implementation. At the end, another // and then share, which is the name of the file share on that FSx implementation. Click on OK. Now at this point, this means whenever we browse to this namespace, Active Directory is intelligent enough to redirect this to the closest file server. So if we're located on premises, we'll be directed towards the on-premises file server, and if we're located within AWS, we'll be directed at the FSx-based file share. So we can go ahead now and click on OK. We'll be asked if we want to set up a replication group. Now this is beyond the scope of this demo lesson, so we're not going to do that. So click on No to create a replication group. And now we have this namespace. So now if I open another Explorer window, I'm going to minimize this to make it a little bit easier to see. And then into this box, type /ad.animalsforlife.org and then /private. Now that will show us a file share, A4L files. And if we open up that file share, we'll be redirected towards one of these two back-end file servers. Now what we would do inside most production Windows networks would be to configure a drive mapping to this location. So a drive mapping to /animalsforlife.org /private /A4L files. And this would mean a single endpoint that our whole hybrid organization could use. In the background, we could then do a backup and restore of any of the files off our file server onto the AWS FSx based file share. So let's do that. Let's copy this one single file. Obviously, this is one file. In production, you would have a lot more. But we'd copy this one single file from the on-premises file server across to the FSx based file share. So paste that in. In production, you would probably do a full backup and restore of all these services. And now that file is on the FSx based file server. Now what we can do at this point is go to our namespace. We can select the file server entry that's on premise. We can right click and we can then disable that folder target. And this now means that this namespace only directs at the FSx based file share. So by creating this namespace as the first step, updating any user drive mappings to point at this namespace as the second step, copying the data over in the background as the third step, and then disabling the folder target for the on-premises file server, you've actually implemented an entire migration of data from on-premises into AWS. Now, production migrations are likely to be a lot more complex than this, and you might need to do the migration over several days, which means you need to use the replication functionality that's built into DFS. And I'll include some links attached to this lesson which tell you how to configure this replication which occurs in the background. So the replication can be used to replicate between the on-premises file server and FSx in the background. You can allow that migration of data to complete, and then you can disable this folder target which points at the on-premises file server. And by doing that, you've essentially effected a full migration of data from on-premises through to AWS. And at that point, you can go ahead and shut down your on-premises file server. So that's just been a really brief overview of how you can use FSx in hybrid networks. Once you've configured this two-way forest trust between on-premises and AWS, at that point you can utilize resources that belong to the AWS domain from on-premises, and that can be used for a full migration or a coexistence between on-premises and AWS. So at this point, if we open up the DFS namespace, /ad.animalsforlife.org /private /A4L files. And if we create another file in there, or maybe just duplicate the one that we've already got, so copy, paste, paste again, and then if we change across to directly pointing at the FSx share, so this is / and then the DNS name of the FSx share, you can see that even this on-premises resource is accessing the FSx share. And now we can provision Windows native file shares from AWS without having to manage any on-premises infrastructure. So FSx is a really useful product that's really important for Windows-based environments, and it does feature on all of the AWS Architect exams, so it's really useful to know and understand. At this point though, that is everything I wanted to do in Stage 5 of this demo series. In the next part of this demo series, you're going to set up workspaces to provide desktop as a service for all our Animals for Life on-premise users. So go ahead, complete this video, and when you're ready, I'll look forward to you joining me in the next.